Okay, Councillor Lavery, over to you.
Thank you. Welcome to a virtual meeting of the Major Applications Planning Committee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Eddie Lavery. I am the chairman of this meeting and the chairman of the committee. Everyone here has done an awful lot of these, so just my only reminder is make sure your mobile phones are to silent, please. I'll now do an attendance roll call. If you can just, when I call your name, just confirm you are present. Councillor Tuckwell.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm here.
Councillor Chapman.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Councillor Higgins.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Melvin.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Councillor Morgan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm present.
Councillor Morse.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Duncan.
Present.
And Councillor Birra.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Good. If I could just confirm the Officer Contingent Planning Officer, Mandeep Malhotra.
Present, Chair.
Head of Planning, James Roger.
I'm present, Chairman.
Transport Officer, Alan Tilley.
Present, Chairman.
Democratic Service Officer and Clerk, Neil Fraser.
Present, Chairman.
Legal Advisor, Glenn Egan.
Present, Chairman.
In terms of technical meeting control, as you are aware, if you leave the meeting for any period, we will continue unless I'm not quorum, which is 3 councillors, but you must be present in the whole of an item to vote on that item. Turning to tonight's formal agenda, we have apologies for absence from Councillors Haggar and Sansapuri, with Councillors Chapman and Birra substituting. My thanks to them. Can I have declarations of interest now, please?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll be declaring an interest in agenda item 8 this evening. I've had previous conversations with petitioners and residents for a boundary issue in relation to this development. So I'll be switching my camera off and muting my microphone.
Thank you, Councillor Tuckwell. Any others? No other hands have gone up. The minutes of the meeting, 15th of September. Can I take those as agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah, nobody's got any issues. Yeah, I get thumbs up all the way around, so we will approve those. There are no matters notified in advance, but 2 items which were on tonight's agenda, which was items 6 and 7 in relation to St John's School, have been withdrawn from the agenda, because the petitioners withdrew their petition, and therefore they were able to be approved by officers. So they dealt with those for us. All matters tonight are in part 1 and in public, and therefore on the broadcast. First item tonight is item 8, Bourn Court site, Bourn Court rice slip. Mandate, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just sharing the presentation. Item 8, Bourn Court, is in Ruislip. The application site is outlined on the screen, outlined in or shown in red. This is the site constraints plan. There are no site-specific constraints. The application site is allocated in the Council's adopted site allocations document under Planning Policy SA20 for a residential-led redevelopment of the site. This is the existing site plan on our screens. Now the buildings that were on the site have all since been demolished, so the site is cleared at the present day. I'll take you through the application drawings. The application seeks planning permission for 96 residential units, which are laid out in a U-shaped formation across the application site. Now the building at 1st and 2nd floor level is connected, so only at ground floor level is there a small undercroft to allow vehicles to pass, but otherwise there is one single building which comprises all of the residential accommodation. This application, a similar application, was approved by Planning Committee with a slightly amended layout insofar as there were 2 blocks on the site. One was along the Bourn Court frontage, and the second block was an L shape to the rear. So the current application proposes an additional 9 residential units, which will be located in this area here, therefore connecting the 2 blocks, as I've just mentioned. So the application previously proposed 0% affordable housing and delivered an in lieu contribution, which was a historic consent that had rolled over. The application before us today proposes 100% affordable housing in all of the 96 units which are proposed. This is the proposed first floor plan, and this is the proposed second floor plan, which then shows the building connected in its entirety throughout the site. This is the proposed roof plan for the site. It should be noted that the site is within very, very close proximity to RAF Northolt, and there is very little proposed roof on the roof, primarily for safeguarding reasons. That includes plant and equipment, which we have had lengthy discussions under older applications and removed them in order to prevent any hazards. This is a comparison of the building heights that we have granted consent on at the site and those which are now proposed. So there is no objection to the overall building height as proposed. These are the northeast elevations of the site, the southwest elevations, the northwest, and then the southeast, albeit this is a section through the site. If I identified earlier where there was a break in the buildings to allow vehicles to pass. So this is the break in the buildings, therefore providing almost a natural barrier for those that anyone who doesn't live within the development to not come into the development for any particular reason. And this is the elevation that would be visible as you enter the site from Bourn Court. So it's built over at second floor level only. But there is sufficient space to pass for vehicles and refuse collection. The applicants are proposing private and communal amenity space, so each apartment is provided with either ground floor gardens or balconies, and then the area shown in green depicts the communal amenity space within the development. Now, each of the family units are provided with a designated private amenity space, which is a benefit for the development. There are 8 family-sized units proposed within this development, which is the same as the previously granted scheme, which is extant on the site. I'll take you through some photographs. This is a view from Bourn Court. Photographs of so you can just make out some of the previous building that was on the site. I believe it's now gone. This is a view of some of the developments on the runway which adjoins the site. Now, a lot of the developments on the runway have received prior approval consent to change from office to residential. Some are implemented, others have been granted consent and now material planning considerations. They are referenced quite heavily in the officer report, the committee report before you, primarily because we needed to ensure that there was no impact as a result of this development on any of those consents that have been granted prior approval and the amenity of those future residents. This is a view from Campfield Drive and Cavendish Avenue. Further photos of the site. So the application before you is recommended for approval. It is important to bear in mind that although we have received objections to this scheme, the development is only proposing an uplift of 9 residential units, which are located, as I'm trying to identify on the screen just here. It has been established. There is obviously the extant consents, which have been allowed for the other built form, but there is considerable referencing in the officer report about the impacts of any potential overlooking, which have been mitigated against between the new units and the properties which have been given prior approval consent for office to residential development, which is this property here, as I'm depicting on our screens, and then this development here. Both have prior approval from office to residential. The application is recommended for approval, subject to planning conditions and a suite of planning obligations which are set out on page 16 onwards in your officer report. Thank you.
There is, before we go on, there is an addendum on this item which mainly, does in fact tidy up planning conditions. Neil, we have petition on this one, so have we a statement from petitioners?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll read a statement from the petitioner, followed by a statement from the agent acting on behalf of the applicant. Before I begin, I would like to thank the petitioner for getting the statement to us in such short notice, following some issues with previous correspondence. So, this
Neil,
is the statement from the
before you
petitioner.
start, do we have any ward councillor comments?
No, nothing from ward councillors.
Fine. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is the statement from the petitioner. We note that the latest proposed planning application aims to infill the blocks A and B to form one block, increasing the number of units from 87 to 98 and reducing the number of parking spaces from 96 spaces to 64 spaces. By infilling the block, we will face one solid wall of apartments with no relief. We object to the principle of one solid block, which we consider would make an unacceptable change to the street scene. Not only will this remove the open aspect of the previous plan, which was valued highly, but also sacrifices 23 car parking spaces. Apart from the 2 blocks of flats adjoining Bourn Court, all the surrounding streets this side of the railway comprise houses and bungalows. The proposed block of 98 units will change the nature of the area. Parking space in South Ruislip is severely restricted, resulting in a residents-only parking scheme, which operates in most streets surrounding the site from 9 to 5 weekdays. The previous application for 87 units with 87 parking spaces was originally deferred for further consideration by the Major Applications Planning Committee. It was considered that a parking allocation planning condition was essential. The report of the Head of Planning, Transport and Regeneration stated, although it is noted that TfL have suggested a lower on-plot parking ratio, it is considered beneficial to apply the higher near-on 1-to-1 ratio, as it lessens the likelihood of untoward injudicious parking displacement onto the public highway, which would be to the detriment of established local residents. This latest application ignores these recommendations, offering just 64 parking spaces for 87 apartments. The addition of 2 car club spaces, only one on site, would do little to mitigate the envisaged prospective competition for parking spaces. We understand that Clearview Homes wish to achieve the maximum density and profit by increasing the number of units on site. This is evident in the progression from 49 units in January 2014, 69 units in November 2016, 107 units in September 2018, which was turned down, 87 units in June 2019, and 98 units in one block in 2020. We, the residents, feel this unrelenting increase is unreasonable and will result in an overcrowded site with insufficient parking space, which will be to the detriment of current and future residents. Many local residents have expressed concern at the prospect of 100% social housing if this means a large proportion will be rented properties. We would very much hope that the council will support us in maintaining a good mix of homeowners and a smaller number of rental properties to maintain the current nature of the area. Finally, may I point out that the pedestrian footpath which ran from behind the substation to the rear of Canfield Drive out to station approach no longer exists. This has been blocked and absorbed by the new Acle Crescent site. Consequently, there will be no pedestrian exit from this corner of the site. This is now the statement submitted by the agent acting on behalf of the applicant. This statement has been prepared by HGH Consulting as planning advisors and agent to the applicant Clearview Homes for this scheme. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the application and provide some further assistance to members on the background to this scheme and highlight some of the key benefits over and above the extant permissions in support of the officer's recommendation to grant permission. The principle of residential development on this site has already been established. The application site is a designated residential allocation in the adopted local plan, and the site also has 2 extant and implementable permissions for residential development. This outline application for 96 units is effectively an amendment to the 87 unit scheme approved by this committee last year, with the primary amendment being the infill of a gap between the front and rear blocks to provide an additional 9 units. Importantly to note, the extant permission is for an all-private tenure scheme with an in-lieu affordable housing payment. This outline application is for 100% affordable tenure on the site, which is a significant enhanced position for the council in delivering housing and affordable units in the borough and a substantial benefit to the current scheme. As a consequence of co-joining the blocks, the parking provision has reduced. However, the car and cycle parking spaces are compliant with the objectives and policies of the draft New London Plan, which aims to reduce the reliance on car travel in London in accessible locations such as Bourn Court and positively encourage parking restraint and increasing non-car modal trips. This site is considered to be in a sustainable location with excellent access to a range of local shops and services. South Ruislip Station is located 200 metres from the site, which provides services into central London and several bus stops. As an alternative and more realistic real-world metric compared to the rigid PTAL levels, the vast majority of central London can be accessed from the application site within 30 to 60 minutes, being a normal commute. This demonstrates the site's high level of accessibility and support for reduced parking. Furthermore, the scheme now proposes 2 car club spaces, one located within the development for use by residents, and the other within the site boundary, but outside the gates of the development. This will provide an additional benefit for wider usage of the car club by existing residents of Bourn Court and surrounding roads. The proposal for 2 car club spaces has been supported and fully endorsed by Enterprise Car Club, an operation already running successful schemes in the borough. With the inclusion of 2 car club spaces, equivalent to a minimum of 1.8 spaces per 1 to 8 spaces per car club vehicle, this equates to 80 parking spaces on the site and a parking ratio of 0.83. This level and type of parking provision is endorsed by Hillingdon Highways officers and similarly supported by other recent council and GLA decisions for reduced parking in such accessible locations. The officer's report states that the application is considered acceptable with regard to its design and relationship with the street scene, neighbour amenity, access, security, highways, landscaping, ecology, refuse, energy, flooding, noise and contaminated land, which in combination reinforces the sustainable credentials of this redevelopment scheme, I should say, in support of natural housing and design objectives and policies. In response to the petitioner's objections, there will be no change to the design fronting Bourn Court or the height of the block, as already approved in the 87 unit and implementable scheme. The reduced parking provision is appropriate, consistent with sustainable travel objectives, and achieve overall betterment with the provision of 2 car club spaces, electric charging points, residential parking permit restriction, and resident travel plan. The proposed development will in effect deliver an additional 9 units, but moreover 100% affordable housing on site. This enhanced proposal accords with the objectives of sustainable development in the NPPF, the recently published planning white paper, and policies in the adopted Hillingdon Local Plan and draft London Plan. In conclusion, the proposal is well designed, as already approved, to respond to the surrounding context and be a positive addition to the street scene. Substantial betterment will be delivered by this latest proposal, which will bring a long-term vacant and previously developed accessible urban site back into affordable housing use. In accordance with the officer's positive recommendation and in the context of the extant permissions, it is requested that members support the application and grant planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Neil. Right, with no councillor submissions, who wants to start the debate on this one? Councillor Higgins, I think I see. Yes, that's the only hand going.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that, on one hand, I can see that what my concern is it becoming a little ghetto area, but on the other hand, it's affordable housing is what we need. So I think on balance, I would go with officers' recommendation. They seem to have done. I can't see any. Maybe Councillor Duncan probably might find it, but I think and the overlooking issues look to be taken care of. So, as I said, I'll go with officers' recommendation, but I'm not 100%.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Cap. Yes, I know you are. Councillor Morse, then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I particularly liked, I like the reduction in height. I didn't like, actually, when we approved the previous one at 11.5 metres. I actually think this is that's one aspect to this. I actually think the reduction in parking, because the issue here is the congestion on the station approach where the railway is, and it is a major issue in this local area. But on balance, the affordable housing, my view is this is a sound recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, we do all need more affordable housing for families, and I'm pleased this has come in, and I hope officers would be able to allay residents' fears in the petition. It will be mixed tenure and there will be different arrangements, so there'll be different people living here. The one thing that I have concerns about is the reduction in parking. Because I do feel in considerations. We're building homes to last a lifetime, and at some point in people's lifetimes, they will need to have a parking space, if not for themselves, then for other people to come and help them or provide help. And it just concerns me. I know the car club is a good idea, and I know they work well in certain areas. I will vote for this because it's much needed housing. I think it is a better scheme than before. The reduction in height is welcome, but I do hope that in future schemes we would get at least one parking space per unit, so that people have that for themselves or for any necessary help they may need in their lifetime there. Thank you.
Okay, I think, no, we're okay. No,
John Morgan is indicating, and also James Roger.
No, John has, I think John has changed his mind. And James has put his hand down as well. So therefore, John, did you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do think this is an on-balance application. I mean, yet again, we're seeing applicants bringing in built a proposal for 60, goes up to 70, 80, 90, and it continues on going up. I do hope that we've got something set that they can't actually build any higher, or to make the apartments any smaller by making the 3 beds into 2 and the 2 beds into 1. But yes, we do need affordable housing, and I think in that sense, I do have to go with the officer's recommendations. But I do hope that we do have something in there to stop them from further developing that particular site.
Well, to quote a well-known phrase, Councillor, we need to take every application on its merits, and should they put a revised scheme in, we have to look at it. The height on this site, of course, is severely constrained by the RAF approach, and any bigger, it gets much higher, and the MOD will put an objection in. James, do you want to come in briefly?
I just wanted to give the reassurance to the local residents, one of the councillors mentioned, and the reassurance is head of term number 5, the parking permits. So the key point in terms of the concern local residents have as to whether there might be some displacement of parking into local streets, the legal agreement will ensure that occupiers of units in this development proposal, they can't get parking permits in the surrounding streets. So that's the reassurance. It is within 200 metres of a tube station. There is a car club. So your officers don't think that there will be any parking displacement in any case. However, the reassurance is through head of term number 5. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Right, we are, I think, done on this one. Councillor Higgins said he would propose officer recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second.
Oh, well, there were at least 2 voices. I heard Councillor Duncan, I think.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, thank you. In that case, I will move to the vote. So Councillor Duncan seconded, so that takes you as 4. Councillor Morgan?
4.
Councillor Morse?
4, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins proposed. Councillor Melvin?
4, Chairman.
Councillor Chapman?
On balance, go with officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Councillor Burra?
Thank you, Chairman. I go for the officer's recommendation 4.
Right, that's 7 voting in favour, none against, so that one's approved. Do you agree, Neil?
Agree, Chairman.
Right, I move to item 9, which is Tavistock Works, Tavistock Road, Useley. Mandit, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The application before us is the redevelopment of Tavistock Works. I'll put the site into context. The Power Day development, the old coal depot is located in this shaded peachy colour. The land to the north of the application site is the Padcroft Works development, which was granted and is under construction. And I believe a year or 2 ago, we granted permission for the redevelopment of a site known, or that we in the planning department know as COMAG. So that's a consented scheme that lies just here, and that one has not been implemented as yet. The station is located just here, so that's West Drayton Station, sorry. So the application site is again another site allocation within the council's local plan. So it is suitable for redevelopment as part of the adopted plan from January 2020. The application site, however, is heavily constrained insofar as the Padcroft development, which is under construction, lies to the north of the site, and COMAG is a material planning consideration, albeit it's not under construction. It does have planning permission, and therefore the redevelopment of this final parcel, or the last piece of the jigsaw, is constrained by needing to ensure that it doesn't blight or cause concerns to the residents of Padcroft and the future residents of Comag. Helpfully, the Comag development has no habitable room windows on the side of the elevation that would adjoin this development. However, Tavistock Works is slightly more complicated insofar as it does have windows which look into the application site. We have worked considerably with the applicant to look to amend the scheme throughout the course of the life of this application. However, there are just one too many factors which always render the redevelopment just not to work. But that's not to say that we haven't tried our hardest in trying to come to a workable solution. So the application before us seeks the demolition of the existing buildings on the site, which are low level, and so you can see how low level they are in comparison to the Padcroft site in the rear. And its redevelopment with a basement, which would provide primarily car parking for the future residents, and an 8-story above ground building. So this is the ground floor level. So the vehicular access is provided at street level, and that leads down to the basement that was the last plan. But there is also a secondary surface level car parking area located here. The primary residential entrance is located here, but there are 2 further residential accesses to ground floor residential accommodation. So the development would seek to provide 34 residential units with a variety of sizes, along with the ground and basement car parking and cycle storage. I'll take you through the plans of the upper levels of the building. So at first floor level, the application site again has predominantly residential facing towards the south. And all of these lines that you can see here are not built form, but they denote some of the changes that the application has been through its lifetime. So the applicants have worked hard. They removed an entire wing, I would call it, of development, which was on the rear of the property just because of the proximity to these residential occupiers. Primarily, we tried to move the back of house facilities so that they backed onto what Padcroft have as a flank wall just here. So that's why the stair core and back of house risers and lifts are located in this area. So there isn't a huge amount of distance between the back of the proposed building and the Padcroft site. However, on balance, this is a non-habitable space, hence the reason that the design has worked to do this. In addition, there are no habitable room windows along the back of the building. It is the windows are there primarily to provide interest to the back of this building and also serve the communal corridor and non-habitable bathroom. That pattern follows its way all the way up the building, and you'll note that there is accommodation on the corner of this building, and that's primarily to provide the building with some interest as it's viewed from Tavistock. However, that has its own complications insofar as it is in close proximity to some of those existing habitable room windows at Tavistock Works. So this is one wing of Tavistock Works, known as Fitzroy Square, and this is the other wing which is referenced in the officer report. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are no habitable room windows on this flank of the COMAG consented scheme, which has not yet been built. Therefore, the impacts are there are no impacts as a result of the proposed development at this site. At 6th floor level, we get higher, but the impacts unfortunately get greater insofar as there is now a habitable room window flanking onto the rear of this property, and that's where the greatest concerns arise at 6th and 7th floor level. So the application, if I take you through some photographs, there are proposed elevational drawings. Now the applicants have worked with our design officer to come up with what is deemed to be an acceptable design, but possibly just in too constrained a location. So there are no design objections with this development. The height is also akin to its adjoining properties and is deemed to be suitable to the surrounding environs. If I take you through to some site photographs, this is a useful image that does show that the Padcroft development, which was not on some of those site location plans, is well and truly under construction and partly occupied. So that's one part of the Padcroft development, and this is the other part of Padcroft. And then this site is what I earlier referred to as Comag, which has planning permission but has not yet been implemented. These are photographs which identify some of those windows at 6th and 7th floor level that I identified as being key concerns in terms of their proximity. And this here is the application site. So that's the existing property that would otherwise be demolished as part of the works. More photographs of the application sites. So those are some of the windows in the back of the Fitzroy Square building. Take you through. It is our understanding that the majority of Fitzroy Square is occupied. Apologies for that. The application has been recommended for refusal. Apologies. So, on page 88 and 89, going through to page 90, we identify the 6 reasons for refusal, and they primarily do relate to the amenity of the adjoining occupiers and also the future occupiers. The daylight and sunlight report returned, which was reviewed by an independent consultant, didn't have favourable responses with regard to the level of light that would be afforded to the Fitzroy Square occupiers as well as the future residents. The application is recommended for refusal. I will stop sharing the presentation and hand back to Councillor Lavery.
Neil, we've got a petition on this one. Have you got a statement from the applicant or ward councillors as well, or just the petitioners?
Hi, thanks, Chairman. No, only a statement from the petitioner. I will read that first, and then I'll share some slides and a brief animation also supplied by the petitioner.
Before you do that, does the head of planning just want to make some comment on the CGIs that we're about to see?
Yeah, it's a quite sophisticated CGI, and officers aren't able to verify it as 100% accurate. I'm not saying it's misleading. We just cannot verify it's 100% accurate. And obviously, there is a very detailed report that goes through the amenity impacts that are actually, I know the petitioners tried to highlight through the CGI. So the issues effectively raised by the petitioner are actually covered in the officer report in quite a large level of detail. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Neil, do you want to now read those the petition and share the slides, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We, the residents of the Padcroft estate, would like to air our objections and grievances against the proposed plan submitted by Linnea Homes for redevelopment of the Tavistock Works site. The current plans details erecting an 8-storey building comprising of 34 residential units, which is planning application reference 35810/app/2020/187. Having regard to the provisions of all the planning documents, we write this statement in hope that you will agree with our concerns and following objections identified. Firstly, density. The density of the planned building is not in accordance with the local plan policy DMH B17 and London Plan Density Guidelines. For flatted schemes, the acceptable density range is 150 to 250 U-HA. The current proposal at 45 units per hectare far exceeds the acceptable range detailed. The proposal has also not considered any of the adjacent buildings, and it proposes an 8-storey wall that will be erected right in front of the Padcroft residents' windows, overlooking all loss of privacy. Policy 5.38 states that a minimum of 21 metre separation distance between windows of habitable rooms is required. The London Borough of Hillingdon's residential layouts design guidance advises a minimum distance of 15 metres is required between main windows of habitable rooms and a flank wall of a new development. The Tavistock Works proposal does not respect these guidelines in any measure. The wall of the proposed building is located only 1.1 metres away from master bedroom windows in Fitzroy Court, which is 92% lower than council guidelines. In addition, residents of Yardley Court would be impacted by direct overlooking from the proposed balcony and habitable room windows located only 13 metres away from their living rooms. This is 40% below council guidelines. Should this planning application be approved and the build go ahead, an unreasonable level of overlooking will exist between our habitable rooms and the building erected, resulting in a complete loss of privacy, increased sense of enclosure, complete loss of outlook, and will impact our ability to enjoy sunlight and daylight as we currently do. Policy 5.41 explains the council aim to minimise the impact of the loss of daylight and sunlight and unacceptable overshadowing caused by new development or habitable rooms. According to the Daylight and Sunlight Amenity Study, 40% Fitzroy Court habitable room windows tested would not meet VSC targets if the proposed building is developed. In addition, 11 of Fitzroy Court bedrooms would not meet BRE criteria for the daylight distribution, reiterating that the build would lead to an increased sense of enclosure and complete loss of outlook for residents. For example, bedroom on the first floor in Fitzroy Court would suffer 93% loss of VSE, 100% loss of sunlight, and 90.5% loss of daylight. The current proposal will have a detrimental impact upon our shared residential amenities, as the building would severely overshadow residential gardens which would not meet BRE criteria. We would also like to highlight to the council attention the manipulative language that has been used in the Sunlight and Daylight report in its entirety as unacceptable and misleading. Within Fitzroy Court, 14 bedrooms would suffer severe loss of outlook from their bedroom windows. All bedrooms facing Tavistock Road would now be viewing an 8-storey blank wall within a distance of 1.2 to 9 metres. This will severely impact residents and children of residents' mental health. Allowing such a depressing outlook is unacceptable and not what we were sold when purchasing our properties. We are severely concerned about the proximity of the proposed building in relation to our balconies and windows, which would only be 1.2 metres to 4 metres away from the proposed building. This is a grave concern of residents, given that Paddlecroft balconies are combustible. Overall, as identified, this proposal is overbearing and overdeveloped. Due to its bulk, shape and height, it would have a detrimental impact and harmful impact on Paddlecroft residential amenities, outlook, complete loss of sunlight in some instances, and an utter disregard to proximity guidelines. We have previously raised all the identified concerns via application challenges, which have subsequently not been addressed by Linnea Homes. This has caused immense stress and anxiety to current residents in what is already a challenging time for us all. In light of the above detailed objections, we consider that planning permission should not be granted because planning conditions cannot overcome these objections to the development. And I'll now move to the slides and the brief animation. So members will see slides shared from the applicant, sorry, the petitioner. And this is a brief animation. And I'll stop sharing and hand over to you again, Chairman.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, who wants to start this one? Councillor Tuckwell, followed by Councillor Higgins, followed by Councillor Duncan. Well, that starts us off. Councillor Tuckwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think for me, the report says it all. I mean, it's a refusal underpinned by 6 heavy-duty reasons. The overlooking, for me, the whole site is just too constrained, and I'm also seeing some major concerns about parking in and around, but particularly around the basement. So for me, I think it all stacks up, and if it moves things along, I'm happy to go with officer's recommendation on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. I will take Councillor Higgins, and I also noticed Councillor Chapman has indicated. Okay, I'll Councillor Morse. Councillor Higgins, please.
Yeah, I will second that. It walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and it is awful. So there you go. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan, you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at the reasons for refusal, and although they are comprehensive, it doesn't mention, as far as I could see, that if you have habitable room windows so close to other habitable room windows, yes, there is a loss of privacy, but there's also a loss of residential amenity due to noise and disturbance from other households. So if you are 1 metre away or 3 metres away, certainly in summertime when everybody's got their windows open, as they did have for many days this summer, well, you would simply hear people's conversations or televisions or music or whatever. And I think that in addition to loss of privacy, maybe we could put that in a non-standard reason for refusal too. I would welcome officers' view on that, please. The other thing is that in the Red Road development next door, there was, although there are high buildings, there are also lower buildings to try and step up back from the high street where there's, 2-storey or 3-storey with the roofs development. And this site is a small site and doesn't really relate. The return along Tavistock Road, there are a couple of shop units there which are low, and so there should be a stepped approach before you get to this. And I noticed that this development is higher than those units, Yardley Court, I think, of the Red Road development. It's only further back that it's higher, and we haven't. I know we've talked about the massing and layout and scale. We have mentioned height, I know, but is that sufficient to say how out of character with the whole view that we had as a planning department and planning authority for stepping this back in a more sensitive way? So they're my only points. I do agree with officer's recommendation, but just wondered if we could refer to those points or just receive reassurance about those points anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Mandit.
Thank you, Councillor. When we looked at, if we start with design first, that's probably the easier of the two. Now, there are actually no design objections because it's at what could be considered the gateway into Padcroft. It was deemed that the height was actually acceptable, and the design officer doesn't have a concern with the height per se, but the height this close to Fitzroy Square was the concern that's been raised in reason for refusal number 1. It's not deemed that it's an inappropriate scale of development on the street frontage and in the entrance into what is otherwise the Padcroft estate. It's just that it's too close to Fitzroy Square, and that creates a jarring impact, which is reason for refusal number 1. With regard to noise and amenity impacts, I appreciate that there are likely to be concerns. How you would quantify those is my concern in the event of an appeal, and we do understand that this will be a case that goes to appeal. So we have structured the reasons for refusal in as concise a way as possible so that we feel that we could defend them. I'm slightly concerned that it might not be possible to defend and quantify the harm from noise from residential apartments between the distances of Yardley and Fitzroy Court and the proposed development. But if we could add it to reason for refusal number 2, I'm just slightly hesitant, and James might want to offer some advice about the defendability of that part of the reason for refusal.
James, your comments would be helpful.
I mean, the reason does mention the residential amenities, and we've got sort of loss of outlet, enclosure, light, overbearing. So we've got quite a lot there. I mean, it's exceptionally close, so it's a slightly different. We don't normally deal with things that are this close, to be quite frank. It's so close, the pinch points.
I think, James, just to help,
the only difficulty is whether by introducing noise, we suddenly have lots of noise consultants pinging reports backs and forwards, and then it starts to get a bit tricky for us at appeal, albeit Region 5's already got noise.
Do I take it?
Region 5.
Said 5 has got noise anyway. Do I take it from what you and both you and Mandip are saying that you would be comfortable with the reasons as presented as the best opportunity to defend an appeal?
Yeah, I mean, we spent quite a long time with these refusal reasons for the very reason that we anticipate there's a very high chance we will need to defend them at appeal.
Okay, I think you've made
I appreciate I'm not giving a crystal clear steer either way.
No, I think you and Mandy are giving
I just wonder whether Glenn may or may not have anything to add while I'm trying to perhaps think if I can give some clearer advice to the planning committee.
Glenn?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think here there's nothing to lose by adding that. There's legitimate concern there. I think it's been recognised this is exceptionally close development to the existing block there. It must be arguable that there is going to be some noise nuisance from just because of that proximity. As Councillor Duncan said, if windows are open, it would be possible to hear ordinary household activities across the way. So I don't think there's anything to lose. I think I would just echo that concern, though. We could get bogged down at appeal with noise consultants' reports, which might detract from some of the others. But I think it's a matter for judgment there. I think it's a matter for judgment of members. Certainly, I'm happy to argue it out if necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. That's helpful. Councillor Duncan, how do you feel having heard all of that lot?
Yes, I mean, I can understand the concerns, but I do think that if someone was proposing a window, or for any of us, quite frankly, 1 metre, 1.1 metre or 3 metres away from our windows, we would be very concerned, in all honesty. I mean, let's face it, how we wrap that up in the planning condition, and I do think it comes under residential amenity, I do think it's arguable, and I do think if this goes to appeal, I think there will be many residents locally from the adjoining development who would want to come and have their say. And I think the noise and disturbance is, we all know, to have a wall very close to us, a blank wall, is oppressive, but noise and disturbance is one of the things that really can affect people's quality of life and even mental health. So I think if we're not going to comment on it in a development that shows this so closely to other habitable rooms, then we really need to think about that as a planning committee. How do we want to go forward on these kind of things if we do get them, or in the future? I do think it's legitimate. Don't let us miss this. And the non-standard reason 5 is much more about things that give rise to noise, known things like the old coal yard site next door with the activities on that and the vibration from the railway, etc. So it's not talking about the same thing. It's not talking about, you know, hearing what your neighbours are going to be having for dinner or hearing them rowing about, you know, what their children should be doing, if I can put it as bluntly as that. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan, your point is well made. Can I just take a quick straw poll, a quick hands up poll? Would members generally be supportive of that approach of trying to amend this to add a bit more in? I've got Councillor Chapman, yes, 1, 2, 3, yeah, Councillor Higgins on the fence. Okay, I think I know where we are. Mandit, do you want to just come back at me and then James?
It's absolutely fine.
Councillors held, I haven't forgotten you.
It would be, as Councillor Duncan said, possible to add it into reason for refusal number 2. However, I'd also like to agree that we add policy EM8 from local plan part 1, which is the noise policy, which is not within the current reason for refusal, and perhaps delegated authority to add any other relevant noise specific policies to ensure the appeal can be defended on that reason.
Okay, James?
I was just going to say, having collected my thoughts and heard both Councillor Duncan speak further and Glenn, I'm definitely veering towards yes, include it. We can add it to the refusal.
And are you happy to take it if we do go? My sense from members is that we're going to go this road. Are you happy for me to delegate it to you to work out?
Yes, and I think the important thing's actually been highlighted by Mandit. We need to make sure that we have all the right policies, and if you delegate it to me, I can assure you we will check and make sure we capture all the right policies to because in effectively what we're saying is, in terms of the residential amenity, it's so close that there's just so many multiple impacts here.
Okay.
Yes, I agree. We shouldn't miss out the noise impact.
Right. So I'll park that for now. I had Councillor Chapman and Councillor Morse held. I've got nobody else indicating, so I think that will probably close it out. But Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. To be honest, most of what I was going to mention has been discussed. I mean, I do support the noise condition. The only other thing I would say, I mean, it particularly brought it out with, I think, one of Mandip's photos of the current building with Fitzroy Court in the background. It was really stark how close they are, sort of thing. I think the building in itself has a certain degree of merit in the right location, but at the moment what they're proposing is shoehorning it in next to a load of other existing or proposed buildings, and the other buildings are really compromised by this, so I certainly won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Morse.
What particularly worried me, Mr. Chairman, was the light report. You know, they're talking about one area, you've got 4 windows out of 30 not meeting the target values. And I noticed that we put this in condition 2, but is this strong enough? Because this design seems to have an issue with the light for the people living there. And what I am also surprised about is that we've accepted the reduction in amenity space, because there's quite a serious reduction, and we've not included that. But if officers could explain why they took that view, because it is something I noticed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No, Mandit, please.
I'm happy to take that. We did all discuss amenity space, and that's us as a planning team and the defendability of that reason. Now, this is a very constrained site. We do have less than the necessary amenity space requirements. However, the applicants were willing to make the applicants were guided not to provide family homes within this development, primarily because policies, London plan policies, do actually promote smaller accommodation when it's this close to the station. In addition, family homes on this site would be inappropriate because there isn't sufficient space for open private amenity space, as well as some of the public open space that you would expect in a larger development, like the Bourn Court site that we discussed at item 8 on this agenda. So we don't feel it's a defendable reason for refusal, but it was discussed in great detail with relevant officers, Councillor Moore. So it's a concern. However, on balance, its defendability in the round we felt was limited.
Okay, Councillor Morse also made the other point about the lighting reports. Do we feel that reason 2 adequately captures that?
Now, we are well aware that the applicants are probably preparing their rebuttal and response for the appeal process to the lighting specialists report. So yes, we feel that the wording in reason for refusal number 2 is adequate because it does result in a loss of light to Fitzroy Square or the Fitzroy development directly to the north. So yes, the wording is there and the policies are there to support defending that reason for refusal due to the impact on the Fitzroy Square residents.
Okay, Councillor Morse, are you happy with that? We have some technical
yeah, so I'm back. Given the level of reasons for refusal, I will accept it. So
thank you.
That's my position anyway. Thank you.
No valid points, but I think we've probably got enough on this one. I have a proposal. I have a seconder. I got a clear nod that people were happy to delegate to the head of planning to revise refusal reason 2 to incorporate noise and relevant policies, which he's agreed to do. So on that basis, I'm going to take it forward to the vote. Councillor Tuckwell proposed. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, for the refusal with the amended condition. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan?
I'm for the proposal. Going with the officer's recommendation with the amendments.
Thank you. Councillor Morse?
For refusal with officer's recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Higgins proposed refusal. Councillor Melvin?
Yes, I agree with that, and I go with the refusal with the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
For refusal with the amendment, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Birra?
I go with the officer's recommendation with the amendments. Refusal.
Okay. Fine. So that's 8 for refusal. Nobody voting in any other direction. So that one's refused. Do you agree, Neil?
Agreed, Chairman. Refused.
Thank you. Right, we now move to item 10, which is land at Ballsbridge Industrial Estate, North Hyde Gardens, Hayes. Mandate, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application that seeks... Oh, I haven't shared the presentation. Bear with me. This application is for the redevelopment of the sites for the provision of a new data centre building alongside 2 energy centres, a separate substation building and a ancillary visitor reception. The site plan shows the location of the development site, so it includes a large swathe of land which is the access road known as North Hyde Gardens. For context, there we go, we've got a slightly zoomed out plan. So this is the A312 Parkway development, Parkway bypass. This is the Ballsbridge roundabout, which is just out of view on the south of the site. For context, this is the Nestle factory redevelopment site. So it lies to the southwest of the site. And this is the Conway plant, which is visible from the A312. I'll take you through the proposals. So this is the existing site plan. Now, it must be noted that this existing warehouse has an extant planning permission for it to be redeveloped for 2 warehouses. That was granted a few years ago, and references made to it in the application report. That was obvious. That had a much smaller red line boundary. The applicants have now acquired other parcels of land which surround the site, which is partly the reason for the proposal having such a larger development under its current submission. So the application site would be accessed via North Hyde Gardens. So that's via North Hyde Road along the south, and accesses directly into North Hyde Gardens. The access road is restricted, and therefore access cannot be gained from North Hyde Road and North Hyde Gardens into Nestles Avenue. So it can only exit out onto North Hyde Road and then the Ballsbridge roundabout. So the application proposes 1 single data centre building, which is the building I'm pointing at on the screen at the moment at the top. These are the 2 smaller energy centre buildings, which are located to the south of the main data centre. There is a substation located to the southeast of the energy centre, and then there is a visitor reception building as well. Take you through the plan. So this is an aerial view just depicting the various buildings. The site plan with the energy centres. Now the application proposes a significant swathe of works which include a new access ramp down to what is the current towpath along the Grand Union Canal. There is a considerable amount of replanting being proposed. Now this part of the River Crane is actually in the applicant's ownership. They again are proposing enhancements along this stretch. There are green walls proposed, which I think are easier to see on the elevation, so I'll come back to those. This is the data centre building at ground floor and first floor level, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, and then there's the roof plan. So the application in elevation form is approximately equivalent to a 10-storey building. So for context, obviously commercial buildings need higher floor to ceiling heights, but it is comparable to that sort of scale when we're looking at residential buildings. So these are the sections of the main data centre building, and these are the data centre building elevations. So the building has been broken up into 3 distinct sections, which are all set back from one another and set forward from the other in order to provide an element of separation between the buildings. There are elements of green wall located along this building, again in order to provide visual enhancements and visual interest from its local views. These are the external wall facade finishes. So there is again great variety. The images on the bottom show the view of the building from the railway line, and that's the line that leads into Hayes and Harlington Station, and then a view of the flank of the data centre as viewed from probably the A312 as you drive over. These are the floor plans for Energy Centre number 1, and these are the building elevations and sections. Again, there is further green roof proposed on this building, albeit it's a much smaller form. We then have Energy Centre number 1 detailed elevations. Energy Centre number 2 has its floor plans and again some elevations and sections with further green roofs, and then the external wall compilation of finishes. We have the substation site layout, and then some elevation details of this building, which is slightly more functional in its form rather than so there has been less I'm not going to say effort made. I think it has functional requirements which mitigate or which prevent green walls and so on, beautification, let's put it that way. There's also a small visitor reception building on the site, and this plan shows us sections of the towpath works that are going to be proposed in order to provide an element of enhancement for visitors using the towpath, and at ground level it will have limited visibility above the shrubs and planting which exist on the towpath. The building is of a substantial size, but I think its visibility will be limited from the towpath because of the level at which you're walking. However, its longer views at the building will be unapologetic in its scale. If we look at some of the bird's eye views, everything in the local area is fairly low level. It is a strategic industrial location, so the principle of the development to provide further employment floor spaces is not objectionable. There are concerns, however, because the existing site comprises a bus depot garage, so you can see some of the buses parked on the site. Now, TfL have raised an objection to the application, primarily because there is no facility currently granted permission for these buses to relocate to. However, through the course of the planning application, we have negotiated a condition which would allow no works on the bus depot site for a prolonged period of time to allow for a replacement site to be found. Now, TfL and the who manage the bus depot on behalf of the operator, Abellio, are content with the condition that has been proposed and is in the application condition summary within the committee report. So although there was an initial in principle objection to the redevelopment of the bus garage site, that has now been overcome, subject to the site not being allowed to be redeveloped until I believe Christmas next year, We do have ongoing discussions with TfL and the bus operator about other potential locations within the borough. So the application has been granted planning permission. It will deliver a significantly high number of jobs both on and off site, and those are detailed within the application report. The recommendation is also subject to planning obligations, which are set out on page 144 and page 145 of the officer report. I'm just going to hand over to James Roger very briefly before we end the presentation.
Thank you, Mandip. Yeah, I was just wanting to add to what Mandip said. It's a big building, but it's a big investment in Hayes in terms of regeneration and the employment creation that comes with that. I won't speak for very long. All I was going to do in terms of the economic development benefits is mention that pages 222 to 224, you've got 2 pages of comments from the Council's economic Partnerships and Business Engagement Manager, who's effectively the Economic Development Manager, setting out some of the employment benefits. The other point I'd say is we're starting to become a bit of a destination for data centres. That is not a bad thing. The fact that we're starting to get a bit of a critical mass for them means that there are potentially opportunities for some of our colleges and maybe the Brunel University to look at those relationships they could have in terms of some of the more technical jobs that come with data centers. And certainly there are some sort of quite technical roles that come with the data centers, and that's highlighted at the top of page 223 in those comments. So it's a big development, but we think it's in the right location because this isn't close to residential properties. But this is a massive regeneration investment in Hayes, and your office has put quite a lot of weighting on that. Hence, taking into account all the material planning considerations, we're recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. I have Councillor Morgan is first, Councillor Higgins, followed by Councillor Morse. There we go. Off we go. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I actually like this application. It's nice to see industrial land being reused for industrial purposes and bringing in jobs for the community. So, yes, I'm in favour of this, and I'd like to recommend we go with the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Higgins, sorry, I had my mic off.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, great for Hayes. Jobs, what more can you ask? I'll second this, no problem at all.
Councillor Moore.
Well, I used to deal with data centres, but not ones with cooling towers. So it's quite an interesting return of cooling towers. I am not opposing this at all. I think it's a good development. My only query I want to ask is on condition 29. And I look at that, and what my point here is officers done an excellent job. They've brought in a selective catalytic reduction, which does reduce the NOx. However, modern technologies are arriving with fuel cells and hydrogen, and all they release is water vapor. Now, the question I want to put to officers is it possible when this will have a lifetime of what, I don't know, the building will be there for 100 years. Can we have a condition where there's a periodic review of what sources of energy we're using? Because I suggest I'm going off in a sort of new direction, but I think it's something we should look at as a committee, whether that's possible to do. If you understand my point is that
yeah, I get you.
It's changing.
I get your point. Yeah, I get your point entirely. Whether we could adopt it, I have no idea. James, perhaps? I'll save Mandip. I'll let James do that one.
I was hoping you'd go with Mandip first for that.
No. I let Mandip off.
I mean, all I would say is I hope members can see that given the very technical nature of that planning condition, that our energy officer has obviously sought to, I think, go as far as we can in kind of trying to address the issues Councillor Morse is sort of highlighting. But I appreciate I may not be fully answering Councillor Morse's question, which is why I'm going to pass to Madip to see if she could do it slightly better than me.
Madip, I was trying to leave you out of that one, but there you go.
I think we all understand Councillor Morse's perspective and the point that we're trying to make. However, I think once a building of this size and scale is up and running and is generated by a specific type of by a specific means and method, it would be quite difficult to then go and check to see if there was an alternative. And again, if it was not financially viable to do so, I don't believe there are planning powers to make someone change those, unless there was a change in the law which required so outside of planning matters. I think that's probably where you could force owners and occupiers of developments to consider other alternatives. Sorry, I don't think it's a planning point per se.
Okay. Perhaps it will appear in future reports somewhere along the line. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I very much like this as well. It's very much a sort of 21st century development of what is currently a 20th century site sort of thing. It regenerates the river, regenerates the canal, so to speak. I fully sympathise with Councillor Morse, but I suspect that that sort of thing will be wrapped up by national wider legislation at some point. You know, in the same way that we've had Clean Air Acts, this sort of thing. I suspect wider national implications will come in. The only thing I was going to raise specifically, if you look on page 149, we've got a 20-20 split in terms of active electric, passive electric, and then the other balance of 60% being conventional, shall we say. Keeping in the spirit of fitting things up for the next 100 years, can I suggest we have 20% passive, sorry, 20% active and 80% passive?
Yeah. My only query, we do this on residential sometimes. I don't know if we've got planning powers to be able to do it in terms of our policies. You're right in terms of where you're going with it.
Yeah,
I just don't know if policy allows. Mandip?
I believe you're correct, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, excuse me. If I could add, the local plan states 5% active, 5% passive, but for residential developments, we now go for 20% active and all the remainder 80% passive.
So we're not going to push this any further then. Okay. No doubt we will, subsequent revisions of the local plan may well change that. I think we're done on this one. I am proposed and seconded. Everyone seems comfortable. No other hands that I missed. No, I think I'm there. The officer recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. We haven't changed anything. Councillor Tuckwell.
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Duncan.
For, Chair.
Councillor Morgan proposed. Councillor Morse.
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Higgins seconded. Councillor Melvin.
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Chapman.
For, Chairman.
Councillor Birra.
For, Chairman.
That's 8 votes in favour, and therefore that one's approved. You confirm, Neil?
Yes, approved, Chairman.
Thank you. I now move to agenda item 11, Allport House, Cowley Business Park, High Street, Cowley. Mandip.
Thank you, Chairman. Allport House is identified on the site plan shown, or the location plan before you, in red. The constraints plan identifies that there are no site-specific constraints. There are some locally listed buildings adjoining the site. Now, the application we have before us is for the erection of a roof extension to the existing building, which is Allport House, to provide residential accommodation for 9 residential units. Now, obviously, Major Applications Planning Committee generally considers only major applications, which are 10 or more units. However, this is a site, or this is a development proposal that has the ability to deliver 10 units or more, primarily because the size of the units that are proposed within the extension are oversized residential units. For that reason, we've had to consider affordable housing as part of this application. Just to provide some other background context, prior approval was recently granted on the main Allport House building for the ground and first floor units to provide residential accommodation. So those have the building has already been lost as an employment site. It is due to be converted at ground and first floor level into residential accommodation. This application is looking at, I'll take you through to the plans of the upper floors, to provide an extension which is visible on the bottom plan to provide the upper levels of accommodation. So we're looking to take the building upwards as part of this proposal. As I mentioned, the application is only for 9 residential units. However, it does have the ability to deliver a greater number of units if we were looking at prescribing the national floor space standards. Now, we can't ask an applicant to deliver more than 9 units, but we can ask them for an in lieu affordable housing contribution, which is what we have done. So where the development could achieve more than 10 units, we're able to ask for an in lieu contribution. And on this site, we have achieved £116,000 for an in lieu contribution alongside a review mechanism. So in the future, if this were to be delivered and we could secure more affordable housing contribution, we will the review mechanism will enable us to do that. So the application, if I go through the plans, is at second and third floor level. So at second floor level, there are actually 2 wings of development being proposed. So one wing is on the left-hand side of this image, the other is on the right-hand side. In the middle, there is a void, so that's providing some terrace floor space, as well as some floors and a void down to the lower levels. So at the third floor level, there are windows which look out into the void and the terrace area. Now, we have looked at this application in considerable detail because there was an element of overlooking between some of these windows and rooms. We have amended the application over the last couple of weeks to ensure that there is no overlooking. There are only non-habitable windows along this elevation here. Therefore, the outlook from these apartments is not considered to be detrimentally impaired. And in this location, although there is a window which does have limited outlook, there is outlook for that apartment, and they also provided with additional light via a skylight in the roof. The plans have also been amended and elevational treatments have been refined, is a nice way to put it. There was the previous plans showed a swathe of solar panels on the most prominent elevations of this building. They've now been amended and put on the internal roofs of the building. Therefore, they're not visible at street level. The building, although in plan form, so these elevations probably don't look very tidy to you, we do have some CGI images which help to put into context that the development would be bringing together the lower floor levels and the upper floor levels. So the CGIs were the ones I mentioned to you earlier. The application site photographs are just shown here. I apologise that they're so blurry, but this is the existing Allport House building, which is vacant, and this is the building that has been granted prior approval. The application accordingly is recommended for permission alongside the planning obligations and conditions set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Who wants to start this one? Councillor Tuckwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a tidy addition to an already prior approved scheme. I think it also provides us with 6 additional family homes, and I think looking at the elevations there, I think it tidies up the building very nicely. So I'll pause for a second and let other members comment, but I'm happy to support this scheme.
Okay, I've got 2 members held, Councillor Duncan and Councillor Chapman. Councillor Duncan first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask what the distance is between these units, where you said you'd had to overcome the overlooking issue. That's one thing. And also, was it deemed to be acceptable in view of the latest changes to permitted development, which say that you can add up to 2 stories on an existing block of flats? And so it was thought that, you know, this was something that we couldn't resist in policy terms. And on a more detailed note, could there be something in it about the heating and ventilating system, as we're finding that some of these units are overheating, please? Thank you.
Amanda?
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Now, the separation distances were approximately...
Mandy, we can't hear you properly.
We can't hear you, Amanda.
Oh, I am sorry.
That's better.
So the separation distances, Councillor Duncan, were in the region of 12 metres. So that was a breach of requirements. And when that was explained to the applicants, they were fully understanding of the fact that there was a clear breach of hab room to hab room separation distances. It wasn't even a non-balance issue. So they did amend the scheme. So most of the habitable rooms look either north or south. The habitable room windows that were looking into one another no longer look into one another. With regard to prior approval, hopefully the applicants aren't looking, because I assume the next application that they will be submitting is one for prior approval on top of this building. But no, it wasn't something that was deemed a material consideration at the time. The application was lodged prior to the changes to the permitted development order, and prior approval for upward extensions hadn't been granted. So it is being assessed as a standalone full planning application. And this is a minor development. It is only for 9 residential units. So some of those overheating policies that you're referring to are not relevant per se, but we can impose a condition requiring details of the overheating for each of the residential units for belt and braces purposes.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just say that the fact that the rest of the building was approved under prior approval for residential, together with these units proposed, it may be that they will, you know, introduce some kind of network heating that you know, it would be relevant. So I'd appreciate that condition going on. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a member's sense check on that in a minute, but I suspect it will be okay. Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Chairman. More than happy to support a heating condition or amendment. I don't know whether I think Councillor Tuckwell proposed it. I'm more than happy to second this. I do very much like the scheme, to be honest. It's a bit disconcerting when you look at the current building and what's proposed, but when you realise that in the middle there's prior approval for stuff anyway, what we're actually proposing is a nice addition to it, so to speak. So I would happily second it.
Thank you. I think we're done. I presume members have got no objection to it being belt and braces and adding overheating to it. I don't think it does any harm. I know it's more common on the new blocks where a lot of the energy efficiency then can take it in another direction, but it won't do any harm. Okay, I am proposing seconded. I've taken Councillor Tuckwell as a proposer. Yeah, he's just indicating he's happy with that. So this is, officers are proposing that this is approved. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, for Chairman.
Councillor Morgan?
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Morse?
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Higgins?
For, Mr. Chairman, with the heating.
Yeah, I'm taking the heating as read down the page, as nobody raised a hand in objection when I said it. Councillor Melvin?
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Chapman seconded. Councillor Burr dropped out in part of that meeting, I think. Neil, am I right?
He did, Mr. Chairman, but I believe he's only gone for a very small amount of time. I think it was material to prevent him from actually voting, but it's at your discretion.
Glenn, are you happy to allow that? I tell you what, I will take it and leave Councillor Burr out if he doesn't mind, on the basis he was out for part of it. So It doesn't affect the result, so I won't potentially muddy the water.
Okay,
So
thank you, Chairman.
all eligible members have voted in favour, so that one's approved. Do you agree, Neil?
Agreed, Chairman.
Right.
Thank you, Chairman. I had actually dropped in connection. Thank you.
I saw you drop out and then come back in, which is why I didn't want you in the vote. But
Okay. Thank you very
wrong,
much.
But I did see it. I saw it on my screen, so I was watching.
Yeah.
Right. Agenda item 12 has been with us before and is back before us again. Mandip, will you explain this one?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Trade City was an application that came to Planning Committee last month, and it's an application that seeks to allow permission to operate the development 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Now, the item was deferred to try and see if the applicants would be agreeable to a condition which restricted heavy goods vehicles entering the trade park during the overnight hours. Now, at the time of the last Planning Committee, I believe officers raised some concern about that condition, and unfortunately the applicants were unwilling to accept a condition which imposed that form of restriction, and that's primarily because they're obviously seeking consent for 24-hour operation in order to ensure that these buildings are let to prospective occupiers and meet the needs of those prospective occupiers. So the application is back before you. It remains a recommendation for approval. There is no additional condition which restricts heavy goods vehicles in and out of the application site overnight. We did look to seek alternative conditions, so we even proposed the potential that only a certain number of vehicles could enter the trade park overnight. And again, that wasn't something that we managed to reach agreement on with the applicant and the agent. I did want to, however, highlight that within the officer report, we as a council did an independent CCTV survey whereby we monitored the access point over a 24-hour period and 7 days a week. Now, I've tried to extract the findings of that survey into this presentation just to highlight that the existing site does have quite a high number of overnight vehicle movements already, and that's primarily because of the Royal Mail Depot's 24-hour unrestricted operation. So if I take you back a slide, Royal Mail is located in this area here, and they have a vehicular access point that leads onto this roundabout and then exits out northwards onto Cowley Mill Road. There is another vehicular access point here. So again, there are vehicles coming in and out of these two access points 24 hours a day from the Royal Mail Depot. So it's not deemed that the officers have made a positive recommendation that the operating these units 24 hours a day would have a significantly greater harmful impact than the existing movement. So if I just take you through the numbers, overnight, the vehicle movements that were recorded back in August of this year were some 200 to 300 movements on average, albeit there was a low usage day, which I assume was a Sunday, but I can't confirm. Of those vehicles, some would have been cars for Royal Mail employees because there is a car park for employees of the depot site, but there were some that were recorded as being other goods vehicles and light good vehicles, and so that includes heavy goods vehicles that currently operate from the Royal Mail Depot. So there are a significant number of movements which already take place, which include some heavy goods vehicles. And it's for that reason that we've recommended approval of the application again without the imposed conditions for heavy goods vehicle restrictions or the number of movements being restricted. We do maintain a positive recommendation. I've got some site photographs just to highlight that the Royal Mail Depot does itself already have a number of, so these might be considered the larger goods vehicles or other goods vehicles, but the heavy goods vehicles are clearly visible in some of the photographs of the application site. And so that's the vehicular access point that the heavy goods vehicles use 24 hours a day, and these are some of the vehicles that are using it along for the Royal Mail depot. I believe there's one more photo that shows again some more heavy goods vehicles coming in and out of the access road, which is now proposed to be used for
Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the presentation. I mean, when the agenda came out and the report came out, reflected a lot on this. And for me, the ingredients are in place to approve this one. The condition that we applied last time limits to sort of up to 7.5 ton vehicles. And as most people will know, 7.5 ton vehicle is an HGV vehicle. And larger goods vehicles that we've talked about are often quieter and actually provide much better air quality with Euro 6 engines. So for me, the vehicles that are being proposed will be serving small units to the rear of the Royal Mail depot and are likely to have, you know, quite limited amount of movement. An operational precedent has already been set with the Royal Mail depot, as we've heard. So for me, there's no material impact on traffic levels against what's already happening in that part of the world. What I will ask officers to comment on, though, is in the last meeting, we did actually apply an idling condition. And I've seen that, either I've missed it or it's not there. And if we could include that, or whether we can actually say to the applicant that as far as possible, they should be looking to use Euro 6 or low emission vehicles for future operations. But for me, I can see no reason why we would need to refuse this, given that there's already an operational precedent set.
Mandy, could you just comment on those suggestions for me?
Yes, I apologise that the idling condition was not picked up. We will. I've noted it down now, so if the decision is to approve the application, we will do so. We do have a low emission strategy condition on the consent, but there is no harm in adding an informative to try and seek Euro 6 as part of the low emission strategy for the overall trade park, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. I think it would. Councillor Higgins, I spotted you.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I did say this, didn't I? I said I think the movements already at the Royal Mail include HD vehicles, so I will second this gladly.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman. I remember when this was first approved and came to this committee, and one reason why the restriction was put on was because of Cowley Mill Road and the quite dense residential development along that road, quite tightly packed. It is still all in residential use, and that's why this restriction was put on. The Royal Mail was already there and predated that development, and so there's nothing we could do about that. But I don't think, for me anyway, I don't take that as an example, oh, it's already there so we can make it worse. I think that the original reasons that this condition was imposed still apply. The houses are still there, the occupants, it's quite dense development, it's family development, and to increase heavy goods vehicles going down this road late at night, disturbing people all through the night and increasing pollution, although hopefully with measures that are in place and are coming in place, this will reduce over a period of time and be less polluting. So I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Okay. Any other views on this one? I am proposed and seconded at the moment to accept the officer report subject to the idling condition and the Euro 6 informative. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think I was possibly one of the few that was not happy with the original application, purely because we do have residential buildings very close on Cowley Mill Road. And, you know, okay, we look at the survey that was done back in August. And don't forget, this was during the just coming out of the COVID lockdown. So, you know, these numbers are quite low. And, you know, we're looking at 139, 109, 151. And we suddenly could be doubling those sort of figures. You know, as a resident living on that road, you know, you're not getting any peace at all. You know, I'm finding it very difficult to support this application.
Okay, I've got no other views on the table. We are proposing. So, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm very sympathetic to what Councillor Duncan and Councillor Morgan have to say, but I have to be honest. I think the precedent of what's over the road, I don't think it's sustainable to argue against it. I think if we went to the existing site in the run up to Christmas, you'd find organised chaos, so to speak. And I think, to be honest, what we're potentially giving the green light tonight is pretty much a drop in the ocean, given the actual size of the sites that we're looking to look after. I certainly don't think we're going to be doubling the problem, so to speak. On that basis, I would support the officer's recommendation, though I do accept that it's not perfect. I just think in the real world, that's how it is.
Okay, in that case, I will move it forward because everybody else seems content. The proposal is that we accept the officer report subject to the idling condition being added and then Euro 6 informative. So, Councillor Tuckwell proposed. Councillor Duncan?
Against, Chair.
Councillor Morgan?
I'm going to abstain, Mr. Chairman.
You're going to abstain. Councillor Morse?
For, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins seconded, so that's fine. Councillor Melvin?
Yeah, I don't think we've got much option. I'm for it, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Approve with the idling condition, Chairman.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Birra?
I'm against, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so I've 1, 2, 3, 4. Neil, I make this 5, 4, 2 against and 1 abstention. Do you agree?
Agreed, Chairman.
So that one is approved. Thank you all very much indeed for your time. Thank you for those who have joined us on YouTube. If you could all if members could just hold on a moment while Neil drops the live feed, and then we can switch off.
Thank you, Chairman.